Hi, my name is Daryl, and I'm not an artist, and I'm not a coach, but mostly, I'm not you. Oh, shit, I wasn't recording that whole time. Well, this is awkward. Because we need another podcast. I get it. I get the joke. The irony is not lost on me. But this is not a podcast. And it's not a vlog. And it's not a little hangout sesh. And the reason I'm here right now, honestly, is for selfish reasons. Like, this is for me. But not just me. It's for the past version of me and the future version of me. The past desperately needed this, desperately needed the advice and the guidance that I'm going to leave for her to find. And the future version of me, well, she's looking back and reminiscing and being so proud of me. So I invite you guys to hang out, grab a seat, get comfortable. Maybe you're doing some busy work and you just want to listen to me yabber. Because, parasocial relationships are our favorite. But also, it would mean a lot to me if I could find people who, see the bright light in the distance of my lighthouse and go, oh my gosh, like, I found something. I see you, you see me. That feeling feels really good. And so if I can sit in that headspace and show up on camera like that, I feel like this is a good use of time. I feel like this is a worthy cause. So who am I? Who am me? Who is this past, present, and future self? Well, I'm a lot of things at once. I'm a lot of different things at once, and that's really hard, and it's been really beautiful. And it's given me the realization that I've never regretted what came after confronting something that was triggering and uncomfortable. And not just confronting it, but actually playing in it, knowing that like a video game, there's this like magical tool that you get at the end of the level to graduate to the next level so you can beat the final boss of that level. And I really feel like sitting down and doing this right before I leave for Colorado to go do the second iteration of my public art show, Hands of Trinidad, which has been such a dream of mine to be an actual capital A artist and do work that is about accessing our human right to our own history, which can fundamentally only happen if we are also a participant, an equal co-creator in the taking of the photos, of the writing of the history, of the recording itself. So in that vein, in that energy, hi, my name is Daryl, and I'm not an artist, and I'm not a coach, but mostly I'm not you. So my story starts in Bethesda, Maryland, where I'm shooting from right now. And my mom and dad met on the floor of a hospital because my dad was a resident, my mom was a nurse, and they fell in love and they had me and they had my brother. And so growing up in Bethesda meant that most of my friends, including myself, were third culture kids, right? We had parents who weren't from this country or maybe were from two different countries, but I was still basically the only mixed race kid that I knew. And so from a very young age, I had lots of identities at once, and it was hard some of the time. But my dad, who's Korean, his family's from North Korea and actually escaped during the war, which is why I'm alive and even here right now, is because my grandfather got a military visa to come get his medical license here in DC and in Maryland. And so he was the only Asian kid on his block in like 1964. And so naturally, you can imagine him walking down the street playing with all of his friends in Cabin John. And I think it was Cabin John. And he would be made fun of for just I mean, think of the lowest ball joke about being Asian, and he's probably heard it. I mean, I certainly have, and I'm not even full, not even full Korean. Hilarious. So what he noticed and the lesson he gave me is that when he looked to his left, his kid, who was white but kind of chunky, would be made fun of for being fat. And his other friend to his right was being made fun of for being short. So what he taught me is that they're always going to find something. And the best thing that you can do is not actually care about what other people think about you. You have no control over it, and you're not unique if it happens to you. So that, in combination with actually being different things to different people at the same time, that was a gift. Because in New Zealand, I was the American cousin. And in America, I was the white cousin because all of my dad's family was in Maryland and was Korean. And even when I went to Korea decades later, I was the American. So my identity was never something that I claimed for myself. It was something that I understood was a label that existed in somebody else's reality to understand how I fit in their world. So I think that that's why I do what I do now, is because like I know for a fact that the identity markers that you're given are the things that you need to peel back to find out who you really are. And that's what I do with photography, and that's what I do as a coach. I ask you to find your values. I ask you to get real and silence the bullshit and figure out what's inside the Tootsie Pop. What's going on inside there? Which is painful, but exhilarating and kind of the only point that you're here on Earth, if I can go that far. So cut to, I get into photography. My dad's in photography. And it just opens up the world for me because all of a sudden my perspective on the world was something that I could force on other people. I got to say what existed. I got to say what my reality was because it just felt like it had been projected on me my whole life. This is who you are. This is what you do. You're a girl. This is this, blah, blah, blah. So I fell in love with it. And my high school had a dark room, and shout out to Mr. Kempner because he absolutely changed my life. And I spent every single day after school in the dark room just printing and printing and printing and shooting and printing. And I eventually got into NYU, and I went there for school, and I had a little break for depression. I mean, who doesn't? And I worked my ass off. And, you know, I eventually graduated, burning the candle at both ends, taking summer courses, avoiding home. And I remember it was second semester senior year, and I had to register for classes, and I really wanted to take a business class because I was about to actually be in the real world. And even though I had freelanced the whole time that I was in NYU as a photo student taking photos at parties, shout out to Webster Hall, I knew that I think being in the real world a little bit, even though I was a student when I was shooting, was that you've got to figure out how to make a living in New York very quickly or it's going to spit you out. And I just didn't want to be a waiter. I wanted to do what I went to school for, which was be a photographer, commercial photographer specifically. And so I went to Stern, and they're like, you're a Tishy. You're not allowed to take a business course at this school. You wouldn't have even qualified with your SAT score. And I got a pretty freaking good SAT score. I wasn't dumb, but they like looked down at me, and I just was like, you're dumb. This entire institution tells us that everything is interconnected. And like, even within a business model, you think that they don't have a marketing department or hire photographers. Like, what is wrong with you? This like sort of status thing, like, teach me. Anyways, I'm still angry about that. But I was able to take a 2-credit course called The Business of Art. And it was run by this amazing woman who was the studio manager for Hank Willis Thomas. Do yourself a favor and Google that person. Stop this podcast and Google that person's art. Anyways. And the only requirement for the class was that I had to come up with a business plan, and I did. And it was for a shared studio space artist collective where, you know, people like me who just graduated from school or were just starting out shared the cost of a studio and then ultimately had a collective. not an original idea. If you go down to Soho, it's basically how all of these artists turned Soho into like the amazing place that it is now, because they all just like bought these cheap places and shared the rent and like worked in them together. So it was a really amazing opportunity, and I ended up graduating, but I was insecure. I was like, I don't believe in myself for doing this out the bat. I need to get a regular job. And my roommate at the time was working for a Y Combinator backed startup. Pretty cool. But not only was it pretty cool, it was a fashion startup and it was run by a woman. And back in 2014, there weren't a lot of women who had ever been backed by Y Combinator. So it was a big deal. The woman who started it was this like total American, dream story. She grew up in communist Russia. When I met her, she told me a story that she grew up so poor that her neighbor ate her childhood dog, which is hard to believe, but I mean, I had no reason not to believe it, still don't. And she ran this business that basically was like a central hub for all of these boutiques around the world to have like one place to sell, so that they could all share like millions of people as customers instead of just like the people who happened to come across their store in person. It was a great idea. And she hired me as a photographer. And at that time, I didn't realize, I was so flattered that she wanted to hire me and I was going to have insurance and a job, that I didn't realize that she was making a very smart business move by hiring all of these recent graduates because they were affordable, had a skill set that were up to here, but self-esteem that was down here. And she had a right to say, oh, well, you don't have any other experience and I'm going to give you this position. And she lures you in with the founding member equity. If we get sold for $1 billion, you could retire your parents. So I joined. I started up. But 2 months in, haggard. Okay. That little lure is the justification for overtime that's unpaid and just crazy, crazy schedules. I was shooting 600 items, maybe more a week, and editing all of them by hand. Canva did not exist, ladies and gentlemen. So pen tooling all these tiny little necklaces out of the white background. And she got mad at me because I wanted to go home early, and not even early, but on time, and eat some food. It was like a Friday night and I had already put maybe like 70 hours in that week. And she was like, Daryl, we're all staying here to work. And I was like, I understand that, but I'm tired. She had just gotten mad at me the day before for making a mistake by letting a bad edit come through the website. And she was just like, I could be leaving with you too. Matter of fact, my grandma is in Russia right now and is on her last days. And instead of visiting her, I'm here working. When she said that to me, it was like a whole lightning bolt shot through my feet, up through my head. And I was like, red flag, you should not work here. So I mustered up the courage to quit my job, and it wasn't even like planned. I'm a spontaneous emotional decision maker, let me tell you. So I ended up in a fever dream on the street on 2nd and 2nd Avenue, right near the Anthology Film Archive, because I lived on 2nd Avenue, 2nd Street between 1st and 2nd. And I was like, at that corner, I was like, I can't go home. If I go home, I have officially quit my job. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I remember that business plan. I remember the business plan. So I run home and I'm like, you know what? Like, I have absolutely nothing to lose here. I'm 21. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have children. If I fall on my ass, I'll fall on my ass. And I had a certain amount of privilege. I could go back home to my parents. So I pulled it out from underneath my bed in my tiny little bedroom that was like, could only fit a twin mattress. Can you imagine? I said, fuck it. I wrote up a business plan, I borrowed some money, and I got a space. And it was so cool. I was so proud of myself. And I knew that it was going to work because I knew it was going to work for me. I knew it was going to help me like become the photographer I always wanted to. And you know what? It actually did. And not only did it do that, but I built it to a production agency and a production studio and a creative agency that had 2 locations. I mean, we raised like $50K on Kickstarter. I have so much to be proud of that girl who worked her little took us off getting Holy Rad Studio off the ground. But even though I recognized that I wasn't in alignment with the values of the startup culture, and I thought that I was pursuing my dream, I was really in a cycle of work addiction and codependency. And when COVID hit, a few months after we raised the money to open up a second location, it was like, you can't work anymore. You can't make a living. We just started bleeding cash. And it was like all of this money that we had built was going to keep the space open and I just think that like I was so desperate and in denial about how burnt out I already was, but how irresponsible it was for me to keep those doors open the way that I did for the next 6 months to a year, because all of the government funding went to just paying for rent that didn't go anywhere. Now, during COVID, I learned how to write, shoot, and post a course. I learned how to pivot. And so I'm really grateful for all of those skills because, again, in the face of discomfort, there are gems of information. There are swords that you can take on the next level up. Because at the top of every mountain is the bottom of the next one. So I burnt out. And not like, oh, I burnt out and needed to take a break. Like, no, I had a psychotic break, y'all. Like, I had an intervention with my partners and my friends that basically begged me to go to a hospital. I mean, it was jarring. It was embarrassing. It was extremely painful. But standing here now, I mean, I can't imagine it being a better thing for all of us involved. Am I in contact with any of those people anymore? No. Is it devastating to think that, and embarrassing to think that I really was unwell and I was really burning a lot of bridges and doing things that were not in alignment with myself? And it's just like, dude, how is it that the thing that's supposed to be my dream, that's supposed to be this opportunity for me to be myself, for me to live in my values, how is it that working my ass off landed me in a place where everything I ever knew and everything I had ever built was taken from me in an afternoon? And let me just be clear. This is never, it might not have been my fault, but it was certainly my responsibility to recognize the warning signs in myself, to ask for help when I really needed it, and to appreciate the opportunity that I had to take that break. But I actually have a really funny story. Should I tell this story? Okay, trigger warning for folks who I'm going to talk about my grippy socks vacation. Health insurance is a motherfucker in this country, especially when it comes to mental health. And I wanted to go back with my family in Maryland. And the only way for me to do that was to switch my insurance. And the only way to switch my insurance, because I qualified for Medicaid, Medicare, whichever one it is for the people who aren't retired, I always forget. I had to go into a psych ward in order to get access to care. It's this weird thing with my insurance where I had to sort of prove that I needed the medical support or like to get it covered. So I had to like go. I had to go do that. And so I get checked in, and it's exactly what you think. It's cold, it's dark. You have to hand in your phones, and you get socks that are not yours, that have clearly been worn before. And I remember saying goodbye to my parents, and it was sort of intense. And I handed in my phone, and they were like, you can get this between the hours of like this and this. You just have to sign it out, blah, blah, blah. They took me to my room, and it was like, I mean, it was total girl interrupted. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, I did my sad girl phase. Like, I'm 27, 28. Like, what? It's not funny, but it's hilarious. And you go into a room with psychologist who asks you if you know who the president is and like what year it is and yada yada yada. And then I kid you not, this woman said to me, we need to put you on some kind of medication for insurance reasons, because if you're in here and you don't need to be medicated, then we can't justify your staying here for insurance. And she straight up suggested lithium. And I was like, babe, I'm burnt out. Like, what are you talking about? Like, but when I got out and I was in this room, I just had a full tower moment. I had lost everything. I had nothing to show for it. I had burned a lot of bridges. I genuinely was unwell. I wasn't myself. Like, how was the thing that was supposed to be my dream end up revealing to me that didn't know myself at all? Because if I did, there's no way I could have ended up in this room in that state. So now, even though I had all of this business experience running Holy Rod Studio, and even back then, I was a Notion girly. I mean, during COVID, I took it upon myself to learn everything that August Bradley and Tiago Forte had to offer. I mean, those are my guys. And I built a Notion system for Holy Rod. I still have it, by the way. Yeah. Comment down below if you want an entire Notion template for a production company, because I have one and I'll probably just give it to you. And then when we had to pivot our membership online and close down our studio spaces, I learned a lot about how to use Notion in that capacity. And when I was sitting in this room, it was basically the only skill I had left to be able to do from home. Because despite my better efforts, I genuinely cannot not work. I've got 6 Capricorn placements in my 4th house. So yeah, I like to work. It's my comfort zone. It's my home. So thank goodness for Notion, and thank goodness for that tower moment, because I had to get my shit together. I had literally no other options than to confront what happened to me, heal from it, and pick myself back up. God damn it. So I did. I sat down, I looked at this operationally, because I can't help it. Insert math joke about being Asian. I really have to process that way. And so I did. I sat down and I was like, what are my actual values? And like, how was it that all the goals that I was setting weren't actually aligned with my values? And how do I get myself together? Because I'm so burnt out that I'm not remembering to brush my teeth or take care of myself. And all of a sudden, I really needed a crutch. I really needed a system. I need a second version of myself that was actually going to support me. So this is why I do this now. This is why I create creative systems. Like, that's the reason. Like, I'm not just offering some sort of like Notion template to make your life easier. But really, the why even to do this is because I give a shit. I give a shit about the version of myself that was in this room that really needed to figure stuff out. And I can't tell you, since doing that in 2021, 22 to now, 2 years later, I have helped so many people. Amazing people across all walks of life. And sometimes it is very just brass tacks, operational Notion stuff, because I am good at that. But when I do it for businesses and for people who I'm passionate about seeing their work be out in the world, because I know that this is a little bit like capitalist, but fuck, dude, like, I do think entrepreneurship is a pathway to freedom. I do think figuring out your purpose and your service should be paid, and paid well. I do think that the gamification of life has an opportunity to actually be the most fulfilling way to be in alignment with who you are. So I did that, and realize that every single one of these people that I'm working with, all from different walks of life. I mean, PhD students, real estate brokers, financial advisors, filmmakers, artists, advocates, entrepreneurs, men, women, like everything in between. I mean, I promise you that we all suffer from one very common issue, and that's the same issue that happened to me when I was at NYU trying to take a Stern class. Education failed all of us. Do yourself a favor and just Google how the United States public education system became what it is today. It's based off of a model that was decidedly designed to indoctrinate the next generation of employees and obedient soldiers. We are tested and molded from the moment we enter preschool to the moment we exit high school, and even after higher education, because let me tell you, I had this conversation with a PhD student, okay? Being obedient and being good at not making errors is the thing that system is making, a brick in the wall, okay? Not a judgment, but it's not going to actually allow you to do the thing that I needed most in this room right after I got out of the hospital, which is to stop thinking like an employee from a list of tasks and actually get clear with what your value system is so that you can be the department education of your life. And then you can be the teacher of your own curriculum. And then you can then delegate that to a student and indoctrinate yourself through your own value system. And yes, I do that in Notion, but really that's what I'm teaching. Know yourself is to know your values. To know your values is to define them. To know your goals is to figure out what's preventing you from living in alignment with those values. And then to execute on those goals in a timely fashion, you need to break them down into projects that have an actionable, scheduled list of tasks. And that's how you indoctrinate yourself. And if you can do that in Google Drive and you can do that in Notes, I commend you. But I've made it easier because I put it into a 90-day program called the Blueprint. And you can do it for your life operating system, and you can do it for your business operating system. So I'm going to cut it there. I think I'm going to try and do this somewhat consistently, but I think the marker of my value in this is play. One of my actual values, which is that if it's not fun, let it go. Okay, you guys, thanks for listening to the Not podcast. Like, follow, subscribe, share. You know the drill.